Hey guys, and welcome to my first drawing lesson, and your first drawing lesson as well. I know I promised these a long time ago, and then college happened, and I haven't had a spare moment to record with all the homework I've been doing. But it's finals week now, and I don't have homework anymore, so I have time to record these, and that's really exciting. So, with this being the first lesson, I wanted to just explain a little bit what my background in drawing is and give you guys some encouragement to keep going with drawing, even if at first you don't feel like you're very good at it. So I started drawing when I was really young. My grandmother was an artist, and one of the first Christmas presents I remember receiving was a giant sketchbook from her, which I scribbled in and made beautiful art for a 5-year-old, whatever age I was when I received that. I honestly don't remember. And then I lost interest in elementary school, and I stopped drawing for a long time. But I picked it back up in ninth grade, and this was one of the first things that I drew. I drew it with a mouse. I probably used MS Paint because I didn't have any other drawing programs. And as you can probably tell, it doesn't look very good. It's not the best thing. But I kept going with art, and I got better, and eventually I got to this level. So this is one of my most recent drawings. As you can see, the colors are a lot nicer, the anatomy's a lot better, like it's got more form, it's nice. It's just a lot nicer than that other drawing. So I just wanted to let you guys know that even if you start these lessons and you don't feel like you're very good right now, you can improve. Oh my gosh, can you improve? So, with that said, I think we're going to get started with the actual lesson. So the program I'm working in is called Fire Alpaca. It's a free online program. You go to just Google Fire Alpaca and you'll be able to find it and you can download it. And the reason I like using Fire Alpaca is because it's very user friendly. It doesn't have as many functions as Photoshop or Sai, but it's nice, and I still like using it because it's easy to use and it's really fast. It's one of the fastest drawing programs I've ever owned. Like, it opens in 2 seconds. It's so nice. Anyway, so if you want to follow along in Fire Alpaca, that would be great. If you're following along on pen and paper, that's great too. So the first thing I'm going to show you and going to talk a little bit about is how I set up a new file in Fire Alpaca. So the first thing you do is open a new file. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about, that doesn't make it any bigger, that's sad, about my presets that I use. So I generally work on a really big canvas, around 4,000 pixels, and I work at a really high DPI. DPI stands for something like pixels per inch, something like that. It just means the resolution is high, so it's a bigger image. And I work at this large resolution because if I want to print an image out, I can make it pretty much as big as I want and I don't have to worry about it getting pixelated. Or I can shrink it and resize it for the web and I don't have to worry about it looking pixelated there either. So that's why I work at this high DPI. So those are my presets for creating a new file. Now I've already got a file here and I've got some line art that I've done. So the first thing I want to talk to you guys about is proportions, specifically for human beings. So, the proportions for human beings scare a lot of people, but they're actually really easy if you just remember a few things, and I'm going to go over those. And I'm going to start over here with the female proportions. Let's see if I can get her on the screen correctly. It doesn't want to fit the screen correctly. Okay. That's cool. We'll start here. Hopefully you guys can see. If you can't see, I'm sorry. I'm a horrible human being. Okay. So we've got a girl here. This is the basic proportions that you will have for a girl. Generally, you measure the height of someone in heads. So a female is going to be 6.5 to 7 heads high. This girl is about 6.5 heads high. I generally draw women 7 heads high, but it just depends on your personal preference. So I'm going to talk now a little bit about where the different body parts fall and how many head lengths they should be and all of that stuff. So the first thing you've got is the head right here. It's one head length, of course. So coming down from the head, you've got your second head length, and that is right where the nipples will be on any human being, male or female. So 2 heads down, right where the nipples will be. Bottom of breasts, bottom of pectoral muscles, for anyone. 2 heads. Stick with that. Okay. For a woman, about 3 to 3.5 heads right here, right in this area, is where the crotch will be, or the end of the torso. Generally, if you go longer than that, you tend to get into taller characters, and it can look a little bit disproportionate. So for a female, stick around 3 to 3.5 heads high. Now, for the knees and the calves, or the thighs and the calves, are about the same length. So the thighs are about 1 head length down, and the calves are about the same. So if you just kind of plan out an area for the legs from 4.5 heads down to about 5.5 heads, then you're going to be good. And then the feet come down a little bit further, about half a head. So that's the basic proportions for a woman. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about arms and where they should be proportioned. Generally, arms are this ovular shape, and they come down just past where the ribs would be. So if this is the bottom of her ribs, you can see that the arms come down, or the top part of the arm comes down just below where her ribs are. They generally go to the very bottom of your ribs. If you can feel on your body the bottom of your ribs and where your elbow ends up, it's generally where that goes. It's different on different people, but it's a good idea to stick with that proportion. Now the forearm comes down a little bit further and goes down just past where the end of the torso is, right here. So this is about where you want your forearm to fall. The hands don't come down much farther than that. Otherwise her arm starts looking really long and really bulbous. I probably drew it a little bit too long here. But that's about the correct size and proportions for arms. Now that we've gone over the female proportions, let's move over to the male proportions. And I'm going to have to zoom out a little bit because he's taller than a female is. So men are generally 7.5 to 8 heads high. I just stick around 7 heads. Yes, 7 heads. 7 heads for every character I'm drawing, but if you want to make them look more heroic, you'd stick around 8 for a guy, or 7 for a girl, 7.5 for a girl. And then they end up looking more heroic. But 7 heads is a good place to start. So, like with the girl, the nipples are at the bottom of 2 heads length. Now, the torso's a little bit longer, so it's going to end up being 4.5 or 3.5 heads down. So we've got 1, 2, 3.5. 3.5 heads down. And then the legs are pretty much the same. Calves and thighs are about the same length. So I've got the knees here down at 5 heads, and then the ankles down here, which I guess is a little bit longer calves than thighs. And you can screw around with calves. They can be the same length as thighs, or they can be a little bit longer depending on the look you're going for your character. So those are the basic body proportions of a male and a female character. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how to sketch out a gesture sketch. Gesture sketching is when you look at a pose and you just want to get down the very essence of the pose and kind of start thinking about where you would put the different body proportions. So a gesture sketch looks like a stick figure. And the way I do gesture sketches is I always start with a head. And then from the head, I draw the shoulders. Now, the shoulders can be straight across. They can be tilted up to one side. They can be really tiny back here and come out and be really big up here. You know, it just depends on the pose you're doing. I'm going to stick with a pretty standard pose here so you guys can understand how I sketch things out. So once I draw the shoulders, I generally put a little circle here to remind me of where the shoulder bones are, where the socket is that connects your arm to your shoulder. From there, I draw out the length of the torso. Now, I can eyeball it pretty well. You might not be able to. You might need to measure in heads, and that's okay. You're still beginning. Even if you're not beginning, it takes a little bit of practice. So from there, we've got the hips, and the pelvis is shaped kind of like a heart, kind of like this. So I tend to do two ovals that kind of fall in that heart shape. Now the legs come from the outside of the ovals, and the thighs come in just a little bit, and then the calves are pretty straight. And then from there, we've got feet. Now, if we want to talk a little bit about arms, the arms would come down, and this would be the hand. And this is a pretty good gesture sketch of someone from straight on. Now, once I get the basic skeletal anatomy down, I go through and I add a little bit more detail. So this red box here would kind of be where their ribs are. If we're drawing a girl, this would be about the general area and shape of their hips. Now for thighs, I generally do this oval shape, and I go down to where I would want the knees so that I have a little bit more flesh, and then calves are a little bit triangular, and they come down into the feet, which are also triangles. I draw a lot of triangles. I think they're probably my favorite shape. From there, the arms, I do two circles. This one is an oval up here, and then this one is about the same as the calf shape. It's very triangular, but it's a little bit softer than a calf. So you get this kind of bump here, but there you go. So that's a little bit better on how to flesh out your gesture sketch once you've got it. Let's talk about hands just really briefly. This isn't going to be a tutorial on hands. We'll go over those in depth later. But I just want to tell you how I draw them out. So I know I have the wrist here, and then I think about the palm, which is generally a square or a trapezoid shape, something like that. And then from the palm, I know the fingers come off in kind of a triangular shape. So that's how I generally do a gesture sketch for a hand, is I start with these really rough shapes that just let me know where things are going to be. So that's basically how you do a gesture sketch, and we've talked about proportions. So now I want to talk a little bit about how I want to structure these drawing lessons. I'd love to give you guys homework, and I know that's scary for some of you because homework is awful, but this is really easy homework. All I want you to do is draw 10 minutes every day. 10 minutes. That's the time it takes to watch a third of an episode on Netflix. You can do it. For your homework, it would be nice if you could stick to what we've been talking about in our drawing lesson. So for this time, I would love for you to go find some different poses of people and try doing a gesture sketch like this. And that will give you a really good foundation to start working on, because next week we're going to talk about faces and the proportions of faces. So if you know how the body kind of fits together, it will help you know how a face fits together. Once you've done that homework, if you've done it digitally, you can send the link to me. Just upload it onto Google Docs or DeviantArt or whatever you want to use, and you can send it to onesartlessons@gmail.com, and I'll put a link to that in the description. If you're working on paper, if you could take a picture of it and send the file to me, just one of your drawings. Don't send all of your drawings to me, just send one of them. That way I can get you some feedback, and that counts for if you're doing digital too. Just send me one picture of your of your drawing or the file and let me look at it so I can give you some feedback on how everything is going. The file I've been working on that has the portions of the body, I'm going to post on DeviantArt and put a link down in the description of where my DeviantArt page is and how to find specifically this file with the proportions, the male and the female proportions. So now that that's all out of the way, thank you so much for watching. I'm glad you could be here for this very first thing. Hopefully it wasn't too terrible, and hopefully I'll get more comfortable doing it as I do more of these lessons. So with that, I will see you in the next video, and thanks for watching.